Hey everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of Rock Your Shine After You've Been Cracked Wide Open. I have a special guest here all the way from Australia that I am so excited to introduce to all of you. And her name is Danielle Wilcox. And Danielle is the owner of Breathe and Massage. It's a massage therapy and energy and healing company. And she's also a mindset and business strategist coach for aspiring businesswomen who are ready to step into their full potential. So even though she's in Australia, she does take clients from the States. So Danielle, welcome to our show today.
Thank you so much for having me. It's such a pleasure to be here.
I know it took us a while to find a time that would work given this gigantic time change, but I appreciate it. And I have mentioned to my listeners that I have started to integrate the oracle cards that I always pull one to set the tone. And for you, I pulled the never ending story. And so I just like to see if that comes up during our interview because you are in a transitional time with your business. And sometimes, and I'll say this to listeners, here's the card, never ending story. And sometimes the way I read this card is that when we are jumping into something new, sometimes old tapes can play and some old fears can surface. And that can be especially true when we've had some traumatic events in our life that have come up for us. And, healing, I think, is a lifelong journey for all of us as we grow and we move through one layer. And it's sort of like the layers of an onion until we can really embrace that deep essence of who we are as human beings. And so today, Danielle is going to be talking about some trauma that happened in her own life and has brought her to this place in time. And so, Danielle, let's go ahead and jump into your story. And you can start wherever you want. I do want to just say that we will be talking about sexual assault. So for any of you who are listening where this could be a trigger, I just want to make sure that you are aware of the content before we jump in. So, Danielle, thank you for coming on and sharing your story with us.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. It's always, you always wonder where to start along the line. For me, I think I really hit rock bottom. I think that's a good place to start after my second experience of sexual assault at 17. And it was just a time where, after everything in my teenage years of mental health issues and which led to like self-harm and eating disorders and different things like that, I really felt alone and really disassociated from life, from my body, from everything, and just numb. Like the numbness was really overbearing at that time.
And just to slow you down a little bit, because you
Yeah,
had two sexual assaults, right? And one you
yeah,
said when you were very young.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
And so that sexual assault, that first trauma led to your eating disorders and
Mm.
your self-injurious behavior. So at the time when you and if you're not comfortable, I want to make sure you're comfortable disclosing whatever you want or not want to. So, but the sexual assault that happened at 17, were you still engaged in self-injurious behavior? And was your eating disorder active at the time, or had you already sought, did you get treatment for those issues before this second assault happened?
So I was getting treatment from, I was seeing doctors and social workers, and I was on medication, but I was still in that, I guess, self-destructive mode is the best way I can put it. The interesting part of that was, for the first experience of sexual assault as a child, I never actually told anybody for about 6 years. And so around about the time that I had my second experience, it was not long before that I'd started talking about the first one. And so for those 6 years, I pushed it down into the back of my mind as much as I possibly could and tried to, I guess, numb it out and forget about it. So yeah, I was very much still in that self-destructive mode. I was trying to deal with I guess the weight of starting to talk about the first instance and all of the feelings and the shame and the embarrassment and blame that I put on myself as well. So yeah, it was a really big, I guess, pivotal moment for me after that had happened, and I just really spiraled after that. And I
Did you tell
I
anybody? Was the second assault at 17, was it rape?
yes, yeah.
And did you know the person who raped you?
Yes, I did. Yeah.
And then did you press charges?
No, I didn't.
And did you tell anybody about it?
I told a friend at the time, and then I told one other person, but it never went any further. So I told another adult, but it was never taken any further.
So
Yeah,
you
it just,
held this. So you went
yeah,
through this. So you went through the second assault. You held
mm,
this.
yeah.
And what happened?
I ended up trying to commit suicide. So I had suicidal attempts previously, but this one was probably the most severe. And I remember just wishing for it to just be over. Like, I didn't want to wake up the next morning. I was like, please just let it be it.
And
Because
what happened with that attempt? Were you in the hospital? Were you trying to overdose? What
yeah,
happened?
I tried to overdose and I woke up the next morning very sick, very groggy. Yeah, I ended up having to see a doctor. And
So you did
yeah,
disclose that you had actually tried to take your life.
yeah.
And is that when did you talk about the rape at that point?
Not to the doctor, no. I had told somebody else previously before that moment.
And
Yeah.
so this was sort of the catalyst then for you to start.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it was around about that time. I was at university at the time, and I remember when I went into university, I thought it was going to be really great because I was like, I can leave my past identity, because everyone knew me as somebody who had obviously, struggled with mental illness, and I had all of these, I guess, labels of things that I'd done or who I was. And so I thought it was going to be a clean, fresh start. And then when it wasn't, I was like, okay. And I remember looking in the mirror one day and just, it was like I had this like glimmer of hope that maybe there could be more, that there could be something different in my life than just the continuous heartache and pain and destruction that I had experienced for, years before that.
So you have this feeling that the never ending story, right? I'll keep coming
Yeah.
back to because I know this will play into the narrative that we hang on to. I think so many of us have a story, and that story can follow us around for a long time until we decide that we want a different story. And I think that that's really incredible because we have the power to change our narrative anytime we want, even though we don't always know that we have that power. But here you are, you have endured all of this trauma at a very young age. And now here you've tried to take your life and you have decided that you want something different. How do you go about doing that at such a young age when you make this declaration that I don't want this to be my story for the rest of my life?
Yeah. It was really funny at the time. I didn't have any idea how to do it or what to do it. Like I said, I had the support of social workers and doctors and the school counselor and things like that until I was obviously at uni. But once I turned 18, I lost all of that support network. So I was no longer an adolescent, I was now an adult. And there was no like continuation from adolescence to adulthood. So I kind of lost all of my support network. And so I had no idea where to turn or what to do. And I remember I looked up on the internet because I was on antidepressants at the time too. So I was on very high doses. And it just made me feel numb. Like I hated the feeling of taking them. It made me feel like I was living in a haze. And so I just researched on the internet how to be happy. And that was like literally the first step I took in figuring it out, how to move
And
beyond.
what did Google say about how to be happy? Was there an answer? Come on, Google.
And so within my research, I came across the idea of endorphins, that endorphins make you happy, and endorphins are made from exercise. And so that was kind of the first thing I started doing, was going for daily walks. And that was literally the first step I took in, I guess, changing my habits. And yeah.
Well, okay. So that's beautiful, because now that was the transition, right? So now you're in uni. Are you still in uni when you're doing all of this, right?
Yeah.
So is
Yeah.
that what put you on the path to getting into wellness?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
So you started walking. Are you
Yeah.
seeing a therapist at uni?
I was seeing psychologists here and there throughout the time. I really struggled to find somebody that I could relate to at that time. I tried a few, but yeah, it was something that I just really, and I kind of got to the point too where I found myself having to repeat my story over and over again every time I saw a new psychologist. And it was getting to the point where I was like, I'm so sick of repeating my story over and over again. And yeah, so I didn't have the continuation of therapy. I was studying social work, which
I
was
know.
interesting.
Start diagnosing yourself. What's going
Yeah.
on with your parents? Are your parents aware of what is happening with you? Like, when you were doing self-injurious behaviors, like, are your parents married? Are they divorced? Like, what is happening in your family?
So yeah, they were legally together at the time. We were all living in the same house, but home life was very challenging. My parents didn't get along. My mum was the kind of person who did everything she could, and but blamed herself a lot for a lot of the stuff that I was doing. And my father and I never really had a great relationship. And so they were taking advice from, the social workers and the doctors and the school counselor, but I mean, it was a lot. Yeah.
And what about siblings? Do you have siblings?
I have two younger sisters. Yeah.
Okay, and where were they in this mix? Did they have any idea what was happening with you?
I think they knew a little bit, but it was kind of it was kind of hushed, like it wasn't openly spoken about. I My grandparents, my dad's parents, they had this idea that, oh, she'll grow out of it. That was always kind of the mentality around it. She'll just grow out of it. It'll be fine. Yeah, I think being the first person that was, I mean, I guess it was their first interaction, like my parents, their first interaction in dealing with something like this.
Did they know you were hurting yourself? Were you cutting?
Yeah, yeah,
Did they know that you were doing that?
yeah, yeah.
Okay, and that stopped, obviously. So did that
Yeah.
stop before uni, or did that behavior carry over while you were in college?
I'd done it a few times, but it wasn't like I was as a teenager from probably the age of 14 through to almost 18. It was a daily
Thing.
occurrence.
Mhm.
Yeah, sometimes multiple times a day. But after I kind of got to uni and after all of that, it was, yeah, very rare that I would. If I really felt like I got to a place of rock bottom, it was something I turned back to. But yeah, it kind of just, I kind of just,
Grew out
I
of it.
guess,
That's
replaced it.
what that's what word just came in. You don't really grow out of it, but
No,
you learned new ways
yeah,
to
yeah,
cope and replace that behavior,
yeah,
right?
replaced
Because
it with, yeah,
cutting is an
yeah,
addiction. It becomes an addiction, just like
yes,
right, to
yeah,
release pain. So it's a solution, right? I always say that
yeah,
whatever coping mechanisms that any of us come up with, people call it the problem, but for the person using the coping mechanism, it's a solution to their pain.
yeah,
So you found other ways to deal with your pain. Okay, so one, you discovered exercise and you started
yes,
walking. What
Yeah.
happened? What happened next?
So after that, after I started doing that for a little while, I joined a local gym. It was just like a woman's gym that was in walking distance from my house. And I signed up there. And at the time when I signed up, they were starting to do like a challenge that they did where they did like nutrition and exercise. And so I signed up to that. And from that, I just overhauled my entire diet. So started eating, proper nutrient dense food. And I started going to the gym 3 times a week to start off with. And yeah, I through that came off the medication that I was on. And so that was really good. And from that too, I started to lose weight because I had been in a cycle of binge eating throughout my late teenage years. And so I started losing a lot of weight. And I guess for me at the time, though, I kind of replaced the eating disorder. It kind of turned into an obsession with the exercise. So I went to the extreme.
Because that's what we do, right? We move our addictions around. We have one, and then we find another one. Yeah, totally.
But this one was more accepted because people were like, oh, you look healthy and you're losing weight and that's wonderful. And so it was more accepted with people around me until it got too much where people were like, I was a size 8 and I was really, really small. And I'd be pulling at my skin being like, oh, I'm still fat. And my friend would be like, are you kidding me? Like, what is wrong? So when I got to that point, people were like, okay, you need to like calm down a little bit. Yeah.
So what did you do? What did you do?
So while all of this was happening, I finished uni. I had a very short career in social work, very short. I realized it wasn't for me. And
was it triggering? Was it triggering?
I think so, yeah. I dealt with a lot of different things, from a hospital, working in a hospital. So there was a lot of different things happening. And I don't think I was at a space for myself at the time where I could handle all of that. I mean, I was still kind of in it.
This is your bachelor's, right? You're still very young. You're in your late teens, early 20s when you're getting your bachelor's.
Right.
Yeah, you're like, I'm still healing now.
Yeah.
Because it can, I just know how, because if you're in a hospital setting, you're just dealing with one trauma after another.
Yeah.
While you're also trying to continue your own healing. I'd like to thank BetterHelp for sponsoring this ad. Hey guys, I want to take a minute to offer an opportunity for those of you who've been searching for a mental health therapist and haven't had any luck getting callbacks. I know it's challenging to find help, so I've partnered with BetterHelp. They are the world's largest therapy service, and they are 100% online. With BetterHelp, you can tap into a network of over 30,000 licensed and experienced therapists who can help you with a wide range of issues. To get started, you just answer a few questions about your needs and preferences in therapy. That way, BetterHelp can match you with the right therapist from their network. Then you can talk to your therapist however you feel comfortable, whether it's via text, chat, phone, or video call. You can message your therapist at any time and schedule live sessions when it's convenient for you. If your therapist isn't the right fit for any reason, you can switch to a new therapist at no additional charge. With BetterHelp, you get the same professionalism and quality you'd expect from in-office therapy, but with a therapist who is custom-picked for you. More scheduling flexibility at a more affordable price. Get 10% off right now on your first month at betterhelp.com/rockyourshine. That's betterhelp.com/rockyourshine. Now back to our episode. And I love that you recognized that, that when I had a dear friend, I'm just going to interject this little story, who had also had an eating disorder, and she was getting her MSW, and she also decided that it wasn't for her. So I have another friend that got her medical degree, and she decided that she didn't want to be a doctor. It takes a lot of courage when we throw all of this money into our schooling to listen to the calling of our own heart. That to me is it's like I just want to stand on top of a mountain and scream hallelujah,
Yeah.
because we can, it's okay. It's okay for us to change our mind
Yeah.
any time we want. It is
Yeah.
never too late. And
Yeah.
so it doesn't matter if we're 22 or 62. We can, that's the beauty of this life, to try new things, but also to listen deeply to whether or not something is in alignment.
Yeah.
And the only way we can know that is to deeply listen, which you did, right? So
Yeah.
you get your social work degree and you decide, you said it's a short career. So I'm
Yeah.
imagining, what did it last, a year?
A little bit less.
So, okay, so you make this big decision. I don't want to do this.
Yeah.
How do you pivot? What do you do next?
It was funny because obviously the backlash from the people around me, they couldn't believe why would you do that? You know, I was the first person in my family to go to uni. It's like, what do you mean? Like, you've put all this time and effort into it. Surely you're going to keep going. And I'm like, no, I can't. I can't do it. I just got a job in sales to just figure out my next move. That was kind of where I went, and had no idea where I was going to like land. But then from that, after working in there for a little while, I became a personal trainer. So followed on from the health and wellness, and then became a massage therapist and worked in there for about 4.5 years. I had my own business within that as well. And I burnt myself out. I got to a point where I was overworking, not setting boundaries. I guess, you spoke about the onion earlier. So it was like the next layer. It was the dealing with the people pleasing and the the aiming for perfection all of the time, and all of that sort of stuff. So I ended up closing my business, and around about the same time I delved into personal development a lot. Like, I started reading books and, yeah, like just consuming the mountain of information out there that's around personal development and personal growth. And yeah, like over the last 10 years, it's just been like just a transformational journey, like, again, I'm going to say the onion, there was different layers upon layers. And just when you think that you have healed something, a few years later, something else will happen, or you'll be in a different space and it will come up in a different way. And you'll go, but I thought I healed this. And, it's very much a lifelong journey. And so that's kind of where I've been at the last, yeah.
It is a lifelong journey, but I feel like listening to your story you that you listen to yourself, that
Yeah.
you make these changes. I mean, even when you said that you closed your business, the first place I went to is, why not just, you were overworking. Was there more to it? Because you could have set boundaries, but you
Mm.
closed it. What was the decision to actually close it rather than just make it more manageable? Why did you close the business?
I was exhausted, like I was burnt out. I got to a point where I couldn't even physically get out of bed. And so I was, yeah, completely depleted. And about 7 or 8 months prior to me deciding to close it, I had surgery, which I really struggled. Like, the recovery was really long, longer than what I had anticipated. And I didn't really come back from it as well as what I thought. So yeah, it was just physically struggling. And at the time, I was newly married, and things weren't great at the time either with us. So yeah, there was a lot of contributing factors to that decision. But yeah, I think one,
So
yeah,
I want to, you probably know what I'm going to ask you. I'm intuiting it right now, going back to the never ending story
yeah.
card. During this time, the feeling that I'm getting, so when you were depleted and burned out, did you revert back to any of your earlier coping mechanisms and behaviors, sort of like that? What was happening for you? Because it couldn't have been easy for you to close your business.
No,
You've already talked about being a perfectionist. So
yeah,
I'm intuiting that you probably felt like failure is the word that is coming to my mind, right?
yeah,
And what am I going to do? And what I like
yeah,
to call the swirling in the head.
Yeah.
And so what happened during that time? How did you literally pull yourself out of bed? What did you do next? What was happening for you?
I felt a lot of pressure at the time. And so I guess I probably prolonged my healing because I still kept trying to keep going. So I kept trying to force myself to continue, even though my business wasn't going anymore. And you said about going back to past behaviors. I, the, the kind of the end for me with my business was I went out with a friend one night and we went out drinking. And so that was one other thing that I used to do when I was younger, was drinking. And so we were both having a hard time at the time. And so we went out and we were drinking alcohol. And the next morning I was still, I don't know if I was still drunk or I was just badly hungover, but I had a client to train. And so I had to show up to my client session drunk or hungover, I don't even know what. And for me, then I was like, okay, I can't do this anymore. Like, it was impacting me mentally as well. And so after I closed the business, yeah, I kept trying to keep going. My husband started his own business at the time. And so I was helping him build his business and work in that as much as I could, because the voices in my head were like, you need to rest. But then I was like, no, I can't. I've got to keep going. And so it was that pull push constantly that I was dealing with, which, yeah, probably prolonged the healing period for me. So it took me quite a few years to be able to get to a place where I was feeling okay. Yeah.
How did you get there?
Through hiring my own coaches and working on the, I guess, the trauma that was still there around being a perfectionist, around the people pleasing. I've probably in the last 12 months really had the biggest transformation. I worked closely with a coach for 6 months and we really delved into the, like, all of the yuckiness that was still there and
Yeah.
recreating my identity. You know, I had held onto my story as my identity for so long. And so working through that, and self-love journey is probably the way to sum it up, is like being able to start loving myself, changing my habits, again, going back to the basics. I literally I started going for walks and just doing tiny little steps, noticing my thought patterns and using affirmations and learning to make decisions for myself. I had become very codependent on my husband and I'd lost who I was. So learning to trust myself, keeping those promises to myself, making little decisions and being okay with what I decided to make. And yeah, I guess working at recreating my story rather than holding on to my past as my story. Yeah.
That's why I love to start pulling these cards, because it usually sets, if there's like a theme.
Yeah.
Because I want to say something that I want to stress this with listeners, because two things that you said that go hand in hand.
Mm.
Everything begins with self-love, and that's all we ever hear about is self-love, self-love. What does that look like? And I know I've said this before on this podcast, but it's one of my favorite things to talk about, because I had to go through my own deep journey of self-love and what that really means. Because when we really understand um, the power of accepting all of our flaws, because we're all imperfectly perfect, and we can really reconcile with who we are and the things that we've done in our life. When we can start there, we start to be able to discover and own the unique gifts we bring to the world, because there are no two people that are the same, and every single one of us has a gift to bring to this world. Sometimes we discover it, sometimes we don't, at least not in this lifetime, for those of you who believe we live multiple lifetimes. But when we start consciously practicing self-love, we get to know ourselves in a very intimate way, which translates into trusting our decisions. And that might seem, you know, I can just tap into listeners being like, duh, well, of course, but it is not that simple. Oftentimes we don't trust ourselves. We second guess ourselves. We poll, right? We call a bunch of people and say, I'm trying to make this decision. And if I've got a black shirt and a white shirt, you tell me to pick the white shirt and I end up wearing the black shirt, right? You hear that all the time with partners. Well, why are you asking me if you're going to do just the opposite? Because sometimes that's the only way we know, right?
Yeah.
When we have a decision and someone says, well, wear the white shirt. And I'm like, I don't want to wear the white shirt,
Yeah.
so I wear the black shirt. But the deeper we go with relationship with self, the more we begin to trust everything, not just our decisions. We begin to trust life. We begin to trust what shows up for us. And the more we trust, the more we change our story and the more beautiful things show up for us that match. I just call it an energetic vibration, right? We've all heard the buzzwords, but what does that actually mean? And what I want to give to listeners, one easy way that you can begin to actually start practicing self-love is to rub your heart and to say, I love you. It's very powerful. And I do it in the morning when I wake up, where you're literally rubbing your heart and you're saying, I love you. And whenever you start feeling bad about yourself, take a minute, rub your heart and say, I love you, because you've got to be your own best friend. And most of us are our own worst enemy, right? Nobody beats us up the way we beat ourselves up. And when we can stop that pattern and we hear that negative self-talk, the one very tangible, quick, easy thing you can do is rub your heart and say, I love you. I'd love to hear from you what you did to intentionally start loving yourself in a different way.
I started using affirmations, so positive reinforcement statements that were positive towards me, and they were really hard at the beginning. Like you say them and it's like, oh yeah, whatever. But
Now give us one. Give us one. I love affirmations.
One of them was, I am loving me. I am loving me. And I started really basic, and my coach was really good at the time because we started really basic. Like you can pick anything, right? But if you can't say it, bring it down a little bit more. So yeah, saying little things like, I am loving me. I am, there was ones like, I am worthy of success. I am worthy of love. I am trusting me was another one. That was a big one for me. Learning to trust myself was a big thing. And starting to make decisions or doing things for me. So whether it was going for the walk when I needed to, going and doing it, I cut out alcohol. So making a conscious decision that when I felt like drinking, there was some times there where I would drink water from a wine glass just so I could
I love that.
Handle the addiction, but then not be adding to it. Yeah, it was just like, starting to make decisions for me, to do things for me. And
sometimes sometimes that's saying no to things, right?
That's
saying
right.
No,
yeah.
Saying no to things that we do out of obligation, rather than an intentional place to serve, or to do it for all of the right reasons, rather than coming from this egoic place of I have to do this, or they're not going to like me, or they're going to be angry at me. I mean, obviously we all have to do things sometimes that we don't want to do, whether it's going to a funeral or, maybe it's a wedding. I mean, I don't know. But, a friend of mine, she was a coach, and she said, if it's not a hell yeah, it's a no. Because I was one of those people too. I still am sometimes, that making hard decisions that I know may hurt someone's feelings. And that's very difficult for me. And I know that is difficult for most of us. And so we say yes, but when we say yes to something that we don't really want to do, then when we're there, we're not there with a whole heart. Sometimes we feel angry, sometimes we feel resentful. So it's being very clear what we say yes to and what we say no to.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right?
100%. Yeah. Yeah.
So, where are you today? We're coming to the top of the hour, and I have two questions I always end with. But where are you today, right now? With you're in the middle of another transition.
I am, yes. I am, and it feels different this time. It feels like there's a real, like, obviously before there was transformation, but this time it feels like there's a big transformation. And behind it for me is acceptance. Like, I'm okay with where it's going. And being able to trust myself, which is something I haven't experienced before. So being, yeah, okay with making the decisions that are sitting with me, like with my career, I'm making a little bit more of a transition again. And for me in the past, it's been something that I've second guessed and I've questioned. I'm like, oh, what are people going to think and what are they going to say? Whereas this time I'm a bit more confident in trusting where I'm going, and I guess owning my personal power, and just, yeah, like there's just this like deep inner knowing that I'm going to be okay. Like, I'm going to be great. It's wonderful. I've started creating new friendships, and I'm part of a networking group that I go to every week. And 6 months ago, when I was standing up there speaking, I was like shaking. I hated it. Now I'm like, fine. I get up there and I talk without even having anything in front of me. And so there's been real growth. And yeah, I'm excited for this transformation period and where that's going to lead me to next.
I'm excited too. I can feel it. Okay, great, because it's a perfect segue into one of my last two questions. What does self-love look like for you now? What does self-love mean to you?
Trusting my feelings and being in tune with those, and making decisions based on that feeling, and being okay with that, and making decisions that are for me. I believe that when we truly, and self-love is a buzzword and it's out there and everyone's talking about it, but when we truly deeply love ourselves, we make decisions for ourselves that are empowering, that are working for us. I truly believe that. And so, yeah.
100%. It
Yeah.
serves because whatever serves us also serves the greater good.
Yeah.
And and that is what shining our light is all about. If we all stepped into the power of who we are and shined our light, can you imagine what the world would look like?
Yeah.
That's what we're
Be
working.
phenomenal. Yeah.
All right, last question. Finish the sentence for me. Hope is.
Holding on to the possibility of more.
I love that. It's my favorite question. I love to hear how people finish that sentence. That's a quote.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, there you
where
go.
can people find you, Danielle?
Yeah. Yeah, they can find me over on Instagram, Danielle Wilcox. And I have a Facebook page as well. I'm also on LinkedIn. Yeah, they're probably the best places for people to reach out and, yeah,
Oh,
connect through there.
okay, and we'll have all of your links in the show notes.
Yeah.
And is there anything else you'd like to say to listeners that I haven't asked?
I think just trust yourself and allow yourself to lean in to the depths of who you are,
Mm,
because within that you get to step into your power, your unique power, and the world needs that. They need your uniqueness and your power. Yeah.
yeah, I love that. Thank you so much for
No.
coming on and for sharing your story and your light and your loving heart. And I want to thank all of my listeners for tuning in this week. I love you guys. And I hope that someone out there listening to this needed to hear this message today. Own your power, you guys. Own your light. Go after what you want. I love you all, and we'll see you here next week. Bye for now.